Okay, Cloud Foundry Foundation Technical Oversight Committee for the 16th of August. Agenda for today then, reviewing actions from last week, catching up on where we are with bots, outstanding PRs, any other business, usual stuff. Actions from last week then, Eric has been and pinged people on issue 386, which actually brings us straight into bots, so maybe we should do that one last. No, actually, I think all the actions from last week will be covered in PRs later, so let's just tick them off for now. Okay, yes, checking in on bots, 386.
Yeah, looks like we had a couple of responses from folks that have been using bot accounts, but I don't think they really answer our questions about like how they're managing them. Like just have mentioned how they're using them to do things, but not how they're handling authentication and storing credentials. So we can keep nudging people on that.
Okay. I'm happy with that. Any objections? No. Cool. Yeah,
what do we want to get out of that? Like, if they respond with how they store credentials, do we want to set up guidelines around that? Is that like?
Yeah, I mean, we could start drafting guidelines independently of that about what we think people should be doing, but I'd rather hear what people are currently doing and try to conform to that if it seems reasonable.
Yeah, agree. I don't see much value in us starting to do something before hearing from users.
But I don't understand how that's like, why like storing credentials is like really in scope for bot accounts, right? Why are we complicating this bot account discussion with that particular topic? Because it is like a really broad topic in itself. And then like in general, yeah, people tend to store their credentials that they need for their pipelines somewhere in LastPass or in the credential store with Concourse or something, right? Those are a bit the flavors that I know of, and there's GitHub secrets.
I think the thing that I'm concerned about, like the tension that I see with any of these bot accounts is that like it's not actually tied to a human. So there has to be some other group of humans that's managing it. So making sure that we're setting guidelines across all the working groups so that all the humans that should have access to that account do have access to that account. And the humans that shouldn't reasonably have access to the account don't have access to the account.
I know from CF deployments working group that it's the migration of pipelines now takes place since at least 4 weeks, and it will take another 4 weeks just because every single step requires a pairing session because somebody has to take a password out of LastPass and put it now into some CredHub of Concourse. Whether this is a good location or not seems to be can be discussed, but it's not easy, and it's pretty cumbersome to give the bot into the hands of the working group, let's say.
Yeah, so I don't think that we as a TOC in setting these guidelines would need to necessarily be so prescriptive as to say like, you know, put them in this instance of CredHub or put them in like this GitHub repo or something. But if we can have like, if we can extract some guiding principles for how those things should be managed, and then like working groups in areas, they can figure out exactly how they want to implement that, so long as they're staying within the general guidelines. But again, that's where I'd like to hear what people are doing first or how they're approaching this before we just come in and say like, we think you should be doing this.
Yeah. So basically you want to potentially guard against people that aren't an approver or something being able to use a bot account to do harm, right? Like that's the attack vector we're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right to me.
So that's a hard one to actually address because like the way CI currently is set up, like nothing is actually enforced, right? Like people that are working or have access to those CI environments usually also have access to they can hijack any of the jobs and be able to do anything. So it's a much broader discussion.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's the kind of discussion that it'd be good to have across the working groups before we come in and say, like, we should do this. And they're like, well, that's impossible. Like, you could have told us that earlier. And you're like, well, we tried finding out what's going on.
I'm just like, I don't know if it makes sense to like hold the whole bot discussion up because of this. Like, given that, like, we know we have this whole salsa thing maybe coming up, right? Where all of these topics would be something we will probably have to come up with answers for.
I think once we hear from people what they're doing and we have that information, we can at least then make an informed decision about the scope of what we want to, not effectively rule on, but you know what I mean. The scope of the things we want to write down. Whereas if we don't have that information, we can't make that decision in an informed way. So it will take a while to get the information from people, but I think it's always worth having it.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, I don't think that setting up these guidelines should prevent us from adding bot accounts to any of the working group charters at this point. We just want to be moving in a direction where we're getting towards the policy that we want to have across these working groups. And if later we need to reevaluate some of the bot accounts about whether they conform to these guidelines, that would make sense. But
yeah, I could also potentially see something where we would maybe change like the access level of bots to further de-risk this, right? Like if people actually don't do other things that I would need admin permissions for, or we would maybe just scope them to one repo or something, like, because we know that these things are like posing a bit of a risk. Could be also a potential outcome. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so
the bot accounts, just to comment, created by the automation don't get admin access at all. They just get write access. But of course, you can add those users directly on the repository if you have admin access and then bypass everything. That's still possible today.
Okay, we want to just leave this for a week and let folks come back to us and then just sort of iterate this week to week, see where we get. And then eventually, I guess we'll set a limit on how long we want to leave this. Just not clear yet, at least to me, how long that time limit on the research should be. Does that seem fair? Cool. And let's move on then. Outstanding PRs is where we'll go next, and all the stuff in the actions from last week will get caught up in these PRs. 387 to begin with.
Oh, that's the interesting one. So, has everybody put out the chili peppers? Yeah, we got feedback by Dave on behalf of the Up Runtime Deployments Working Group and from Marcela for services. Everybody else has at least not vetoed.
Given so few responses so far, like I think personally we should wait another week.
One thing that just occurred to me, if we're picking that working groups leads list, like Amelia's still out on leave. So I don't know if like Ben and Carson, who've been filling in for her, got any notification about this. So why don't I ping them right now as on a comment as the interim leads.
Okay, then in that case, let's move on. 394 is next up. I will fix typos.
Yeah, the typos doesn't matter so much, but when reading through it, I saw one sentence which used the word reviewer before, which was in a different context. It was not the role, but it was just that people were actively working on PRs, etc. So maybe we have to change that a bit, because I don't think we want to require that somebody has a reviewer role for 3 months before the user can get approver roles. It's just a means to get faster towards approver. So we don't want to add additional burden, but instead we wanted to ease the burden. That was one thing that where we may change the sentence a bit.
That makes sense to me. Any alternate thoughts? Cool. I will update that later in the week. Okay, 393 is next. I think this might be able to be approved and merged.
Let me check, because our contributor service enablement. Would we add bots to the contributors YAML?
Do we need to do that just so that they're members of the org? Or is that going to happen automatically?
That should happen automatic. I know it for sure for approvers, etc. And I'm pretty sure I could look it up.
One thing I was unsure if I needed to add it or not. One thing is that this bot, this exists in another org, and we have it as an outside collaborator at the moment in this org, and didn't know if I needed to put it there or not. Just let me know.
Anybody know?
And like it shouldn't, like if it does, if you need to add it there, then it's a bug, and we should fix that in the automation probably. Because
I can. Let's do it like this, and we remove it here, and I will check it up at a test.
If it doesn't work,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because the CI, like it will fail, because then it's that like the user is not in the org. And you need to fix that.
Okay, so are we happy to approve a merge, if I understood that right?
We would remove from the
We'll make that change.
Oh, so I thought you wanted to do it after, like if it failed after the merge. Right, I'm with you now.
No, it's the other way around. We remove it. We hope that it's working, and if it doesn't work, I will fix the automation until it works. So you get your bot, that's for sure.
Okay, let's move on then. 392.
This is also on preparation for the removing non-standard GitHub Teams stuff. Like Ian had been added. I didn't know about it. He had been added to the repos in some other way and not through the working group charter. And so I just added him as an approver right now, because he does occasional technical work on volume services, which are not in active development. They are more like in maintenance, mostly.
Any objections? No. Let's get this approved and merged then. Just give folks a chance to approve.
Slow.
We have our majority there. Let's push the button. Do we delete the branch? Or do we leave it as is?
Yeah.
Cool. Should probably be more diligent about deleting branches on the community repo.
Okay, so 391 next. Much the same by the looks of it.
Marcela, are there enough active folks in this area that we should have people attest to, or like, have a second approver or something within this area?
Yeah, I can
constitute?
ask people to approve.
Okay.
Right
Okay,
now.
formally, TOC is not required, right, here to vote.
Yeah.
It's then in the hands of the of you.
So if I get the other people to approve, can I just merge afterwards? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it says something like half of the approvers or something like quorum, or is that like at least 2 or 3? I don't know.
least
It says
2.
something in.
There's an RC08 with a role. But there's two approvers.
Okay. Let's move on to 325, maybe. I don't know if we want to try and progress this one.
I think we have to postpone one more time. At least that's what's the discussion in the last.
I've set up a call. I have it later today. I was trying to schedule it for last week, but that didn't work.
Fair enough. Okay, let's move on to some stale things then. So I went through this last week at some point, can't remember. Most of it either just needed closing, had kind of already been done, or needed discussion here. There wasn't really anything to prompt the original raises of the issue on. So 4040 is up first. I couldn't see a reason not to do this, but I also could see that it hadn't been done. And rather than do anything, I thought I'd come and ask for context. If anybody else knew anything.
I think that we already ended up moving a copy of the code of conduct document into the community repo to make it easier to refer to within GitHub. Oh yeah, here, I think this is it anyway. It's in the .github directory in the community repo. So like that's already covered. I think the only other thing would be a copy of the actual charter, which maybe we might actually have that too, again, on an unofficial basis. Yeah, so we have that too. So actually this is done, so we can just close this out.
Well, in that, maybe I sort of didn't read this quite right, but my interpretation was that the person requesting this was suggesting that the links on the website should point to the files in GitHub, and those should be the authoritative copy. Have I misinterpreted that, do you think?
I think actually, like, we can't keep the charter document for the foundation as authoritative in the community repo, because the wording of that is actually like handled by the governing board itself.
Oh, okay.
So we could only keep a copy of that here.
Right. Okay. In that case, let's just close this off if it's already been done.
Yeah, I think we can close this as done.
Any objections? No. Cool. 41, sorry, 41. Yes, I went and looked this up. It does still say 1 to 3-ish leads in the governance document.
Is that the one that we also just want to like eliminate because we think it's now fully represented in the other more official documents?
Oh, possibly. I can't remember which issue that is.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I think
97.
97 is, this document needs to go away.
Yeah, and the 3-ish doesn't appear in any of the other files. Okay, in that case, that we can close that.
Yeah.
Good spot. 9696. Don't know why I've decided to be a bingo caller today. Yeah, I read this. Couldn't think of a better place to put this. Honestly, it seemed fine where it was.
Yeah, it looked to me similar to this role change process RFC, just for the leads, execution leads and workgroup leads. But I don't know if that's really necessary at the moment. I mean, there's not that much change. I would usually postpone it until we see a problem with the existing text, and good for now, good enough for now.
Any objections? Cool. That's a nice easy one. Let's close it off. Uh, 9797. This might want a second pair of eyes to do the effectively the same work I did, just reading it and sort of checking in the other documents. Because it would be easy to miss something, I think.
I don't know, I feel like just even scanning over the governance document again, we've got all the important stuff represented in the other documents and how we've codified practices. So I think it sounds good to, like, we could open a PR just to delete this document, I think, at this point.
Okay, I'll say that as an action. I'll leave the issue open until we've done the PR. Okay, 9898. This one has a fair amount of discussion on it. And it looked like maybe it just wanted to be reprompted. But with it being so long ago, I didn't know whether things may have changed in the meantime and rendered some of this discussion void. Given that there is so much discussion on it, do we want to take this as an action just to review it in our own time?
Yeah, probably good. I've reached my limit on reloading all the context on this.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll stick that down as an action for everyone then.
I mean, it's an interesting idea, but you need like a lot of branch protection rules to be in place to do this in a safe way. We don't have any automation for that yet. No. So to me, this is too early, basically. We need a lot of other things in place to be able to do this. So yeah, nice long-term idea.
Is it worth adding that as a comment onto that so that we don't lose that notion? Okay, let's move on to 119. Clearly, summary of official TOC definition of the TOC document. I think it is there. I think. No, it mustn't be. Otherwise, I would have closed this. So that's section 7. Yes, it definitely isn't in there. Do we still want to do this?
I don't know. We do link to our copy of the charter in the TOC document.
Are we happy that that's
Yeah.
sufficient?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing.
Yeah, why don't
Any
we
dissenting
can just close
faces?
this out. Yeah.
Cool.
If someone gets inspired and wants to do that on their own later, then can.
Oh, let's close that then.
I know that guy,
Okay.
he's going to be upset that we just closed his issue without comment.
Ah, what's he gonna do?
Maybe it helps that person be inspired to make an actual PR.
122 then, transparency and clarity as synonyms. So I read this, I went, I mean, well, they are synonyms. They're like, they have distinct enough meaning, at least. It didn't cross my mind when I read those things for the first time without seeing this issue that I didn't immediately go, well, those two things are the same, right? So I don't know, maybe as an outsider, it didn't bother me in the slightest. Do we still feel strongly, Eric?
I mean, I'm even looking at the text and the principles, and what we intend to do under transparency and clarity is about the same. So I still feel like they could be consolidated.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you look at the clarity stuff, it's about being transparent about rules and practices. I mean, the transparency section seems to be more about transparency of decisions, like what's been done in the past versus what the process is, but I still feel like that could be consolidated under that similar theme.
What do others think?
I have a lot of opinions about things with words in general. So
Fair enough.
Yeah. I would not argue with anybody. With a native speaker about the meaning.
If you want to have a stab at rewording, I'm happy to review and.
I mean, I think the other question is, it's kind of nice to have like a triumvirate of principles, like 3 things.
Yeah, rule of 3
so
always works.
Could we come up with a 3rd principle? I mean, Jan suggested kindness as another principle, which is maybe a good candidate for this community.
Yeah.
We could just leave this open and for the time being and see if we want to address it now that it's back on our radar.
Do you want me to move this as, well, actually it's open and I'll stick it in the open PR section next week rather than sticking it in the agenda for next week, which is what I was going to suggest then, but then caught myself. Okay. Right, that is the end of those. I think that covered everything out of the actions from last week. Looking at it, yes, it did. Cool. Any other business? No.
Oh, one thing that occurred to me, we'd kind of gotten off of our cadence of asking the working groups to come in roughly weekly with an update on how things are going. I know I'm expecting folks to be a little bit busy with preparing submissions for CF Day. But maybe once that's done, we could resume the cycle. I think vulnerability management would be next. There's just been kind of an ongoing Slack thread in the TOC channel where we occasionally staple it back to the main thread to ask people to, if they could come in next week and give an update on the working group. So.
Okay, so we start that again in what's the closing date for submissions?
I think the 26th.
Okay, so next week. So yeah, in 2 weeks' time then.
Yeah, maybe we could just remind ourselves for next week to give a reminder.
Yeah.
On that thread.
I'll stick it in the agenda for next time because we may want to talk about trying to get a few lined up in advance, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
There's one more point on any other business. I'm in vacation from next week on for 4 weeks, and that now leaves SAP in a pretty tricky situation because Behan is on parental leave and Stephan Clevens from the governance board, who could be approached, is also in vacation. He comes and he is at least for 3 weeks out. So in case there's somewhere a, let's say, vote or decision or whatever needed with involvement of SAP, I would suggest to involve Jens Hüsken. He is known, I think, in these areas, and he is at least available. Just if something critical comes up, I'm not sure, but if you need a contact, then Jens Hüsken would be the person to get. I mean, you could try to ping me on my Gmail account, but I won't promise anything because I'm somewhere in the mountains where you don't have necessarily network on things like that.
Do you pop the name into any other business for me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Is that person on CF Slack?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Any other business? Nope. Marcela, did you get everything you needed off us?
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. Cool. Then let's wrap things up and see each other next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
See you all next week. It's all right.